a princess destined to drown a kingdom in blood. What if the very night you were born, the sky declared you a curse? What if the stars themselves whispered that one day an entire kingdom would fall because of you? Tonight's story follows a princess marked by a death prophecy, a child born beneath a bleeding comet, destined to carry the balance of life and destruction in her hands, loved by her parents, feared by her people, hunted by fate itself. But here's the question: was she born to destroy her kingdom or to rewrite destiny? Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, I'm so glad you found your way into our world of epic drama, dark prophecies, forbidden magic, and unforgettable royalty. Before we dive into this powerful fantasy journey, I just want to say thank you for all the love and support you've shown on the previous story. Your comments, your excitement, and your theories truly mean everything. It inspires me to keep creating these cinematic, emotional tales for you. If you enjoy stories filled with royal secrets, betrayal, and forbidden power, epic battles, emotional twists, strong, unforgettable heroines, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves dramatic fantasy stories. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to keep bringing you bigger and better stories. And most importantly, comment below and tell me how you felt about the previous story. Did it surprise you, break your heart, leave you wanting more? Would you like more dark royal prophecies like this? More forbidden magic? More intense love and betrayal? Let me know. Now, dim the lights, turn up the volume, and step into a kingdom where the stars bleed red. This is the story of the princess born under a death prophecy. The Night of Crimson Stars. The night Princess Seraphina was born, the heavens turned against themselves. A crimson comet split the sky above Valorith, blazing like a wound across the darkness. It was brighter than any star recorded in the royal archives, brighter even than the harvest moon that once signalled the kingdom's golden age. Its tail burned red and gold, staining the clouds as if dawn had arrived too soon, and far too angry. Below that bleeding sky stood the ancient citadel of Valorith, its white towers now drenched in scarlet light. Citizens poured from their homes into the cobbled streets, whispering prayers to gods they had not spoken to in years. Old women crossed themselves, soldiers removed their helms, even the night watch forgot their posts, staring upward in silent dread. High in the tallest tower of the palace, Queen Elowyn laboured. Silk sheets twisted in her fists as waves of pain overtook her. The birthing chamber glowed with candlelight, but every flame flickered violently as if disturbed by an unseen wind. Red light streamed through the stained glass windows, transforming saints and angels into crimson spectres upon the walls. "Your Majesty, breathe," the midwife urged gently. Outside the chamber doors, King Alaric stood motionless in the corridor, his hand gripping the pommel of his ceremonial sword so tightly his knuckles blanched white. He was a warrior king, hardened by border wars and rebellion, yet tonight fear hollowed his chest. Not fear of losing his queen, fear of the sky. Footsteps echoed against stone. Lord Valor, the royal astrologer, approached with trembling hands clutching rolled parchments bound in red thread. His aged face looked ashen beneath the comet's glow. "My king," Valor said, voice unsteady. "The alignment is complete." Alaric did not turn. "Speak plainly." "The Crimson Star has crossed the Vale of Thorns and rests beneath the scales of Erendor. A child born under such a convergence." His voice faltered. Alaric's jaw tightened. "Finish it." "Will carry the balance of life and death within her soul. In her 21st year, blood shall drown Valorith by her hand or for her sake." The corridor fell silent, except for the distant cry of a woman in labour. At that very moment, a newborn's cry pierced the air. The chamber doors opened. A midwife emerged, pale but smiling. "A daughter, Your Majesty." Alaric stepped inside. Queen Elowyn lay exhausted against embroidered pillows, strands of dark hair clinging to her damp cheeks. In her arms rested a tiny infant wrapped in ivory cloth. The child's eyes fluttered open briefly, and for a heartbeat they shimmered with the same crimson reflected in the sky. Elowyn looked up at her husband. "She is not Doom," she whispered fiercely. "She is our miracle." Alaric stared at his daughter, so small, so fragile, impossible to imagine as the centre of ruin. Outside, the comet flared brighter, casting a final blazing arc across the sky before fading beyond the horizon. "The prophecy will be sealed," Alaric said at last, voice iron hard. No soul beyond this chamber will speak of it. She will grow loved, protected. Valor bowed his head, though unease lingered in his eyes, for prophecies once written in the stars were not so easily silenced. As the kingdom slowly returned indoors and the red glow drained from the heavens, Princess Seraphina slept peacefully against her mother's heart, unaware that her first breath had shifted the balance of the world. And far beyond the borders of Valarith, in forgotten lands where ancient magic stirred beneath stone and shadow, others had seen the comet. They too had begun to prepare. Princess Seraphina grew beneath walls gilded with gold and woven with secrets. The palace of Valarith, grander than any city street, rose like a fortress over the kingdom. Its marble halls shimmered with candlelight, frescoed ceilings told stories of kings and wars, and crystal chandeliers scattered rainbows across polished floors. To an outsider, it seemed a paradise. To Seraphina, it often felt like a cage. Her earliest memories were of corridors too long to run down, tapestries too heavy to move, and the soft hum of whispers that always followed her. Servants adored her, not merely for her beauty, but for her laughter, which often broke through the cold formality of court life. Soldiers in shining armor would sometimes pause in their patrols, smiling at the sight of the tiny princess chasing a stray cat across the courtyard. Yet all these moments of joy came tethered to rules she could not understand. "You may not wander alone," her nursemaid, old Madame Sira, reminded her daily. "Even the palace gates hide unseen dangers." "And why is that?" Seraphina asked at 7, her brown eyes wide, the soft curls of her hair catching the morning light. "Because some things are not meant for children," the nurse replied with a sigh that betrayed more than she wished. But Seraphina felt the world pressing against her. When she played in the gardens, she could sense something in the wind, a quiet tension as if the flowers themselves held their breath. It was subtle, imperceptible to the soldiers and servants who laughed and sang. But Seraphina noticed. She began to feel that she was always under watch, not just by guards or her parents, but by the very kingdom itself. By the time she was 9, strange accidents began shadowing her steps. A vase toppled from the council room ledge, shattering despite no one touching it. A stable horse slipped and fell, unnaturally startled by her presence. Crops in distant villages withered after she passed through their fields. No one spoke of it openly, yet whispers followed her through the palace. The Crimson Star child, the one the prophecy marked. Her parents tried to shield her from the growing murmur of fear. King Alaric expanded patrols across the city, ordering strict safety measures in every district. Queen Elowyn, ever tender, would brush back her daughter's hair at night and murmur, "You are our light, Seraphina. Never forget that." But Seraphina knew. She could feel a tension rippling beneath the laughter of the servants, the discipline of the soldiers, and even in her parents' guarded gazes. The world around her seemed fragile, as though her every move could tip the balance of something larger, unseen. In secret chambers of the palace, King Alaric pored over maps, scrolls, and ancient texts, preparing defences for a fate he neither fully understood nor wished to explain. Even as he trained Seraphina in the etiquette and governance befitting a future queen, he feared her awakening powers more than any enemy at the gates. Meanwhile, beyond Valarith's stone walls, hidden in forests shrouded with perpetual mist, the young sorcerer Malrek pored over forbidden texts. He had heard whispers of the Crimson Star child and recognized the alignment in the stars. Unlike the king, Malrek did not tremble before prophecies. He embraced them. In the darkness, he murmured to himself, "The child is powerful, and she will be mine, whether she knows it or not." And so Seraphina grew, a brilliant, stubborn girl surrounded by love and fear, adored yet confined, protected yet watched. Every moment of her childhood shimmered with magic she did not yet understand, and every joy was tinged with the shadow of a prophecy she could neither see nor escape. The kingdom saw a princess. The stars saw a child who might one day determine the fate of Valarith. And Seraphina would feel that weight long before she could even understand it. On the morning of her 16th birthday, Princess Seraphina woke with a restlessness that gnawed at her chest. The palace corridors were alive with preparation. Servants carrying trays of fruit, musicians tuning their lutes, banners being hung in anticipation of the evening feast. But the celebration felt hollow. To Seraphina, the marble halls seemed like a cage dressed in gold. She longed to feel the world outside, to walk unnoticed among people who did not bow or whisper her name. By midday, she had made her decision. Slipping into a simple grey cloak borrowed from a servant, she braided her golden hair tightly beneath a hood and crept through a little-used garden gate. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from exhilaration. The marketplace of Valerith stretched before her, vibrant and alive. Merchants called out prices for honeyed almonds and gleaming blades. Children darted between stalls, their laughter ringing through the air. The scent of roasted meats and fresh bread mingled with the crisp spring wind. Seraphina moved among them, unnoticed and invisible. For the first time, she was just a girl. Then chaos erupted. A wagon's axle snapped, spilling sacks of grain and sending the horses into a frantic panic. People screamed and scattered. Amid the confusion, a thief lunged at a young boy shielding his sister. A blade flashed. The boy collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. Without thinking, Seraphina ran forward. She pressed her hands over the wound. "Stay with me. Don't leave," she whispered. A surge of heat coursed through her, pulsing beneath her skin. Crimson light spilled from her palms, wrapping the boy's body in warmth. Slowly, the bleeding stopped. His chest rose with a shaky breath, his sister clutching his arm in relief. But the miracle came at a cost. Nearby, a merchant who had been shouting orders moments before crumpled to the ground, lifeless. The crowd fell silent, staring at her with wide-eyed fear. "She did it!" someone gasped. "She killed him!" Horror washed over Seraphina. She had saved a life, but another had been claimed. Guards arrived moments later, pulling her hood back. Recognition flashed across their faces, not awe or relief, but terror. That night, King Alaric reopened the sealed prophecy scroll. His eyes scanned the words he had tried to forget. The balance of life shall tip in her wake. One shall rise as another falls. The first blood had been spilled, and with it the prophecy had begun. The throne room felt colder than ever before, despite the late morning sun streaming through the high windows. Seraphina stood with her hands clenched at her sides, her silver gown shimmering faintly in the light. Her cloak, the grey one she had worn in the marketplace, lay folded neatly in the corner, unused now. Her face, pale but determined, reflected the fire she had felt after the events at the market. "I demand the truth," she said, her voice echoing against the marble walls. "I healed a boy today, and another man died. What is happening to me?" King Alaric's face was taut, the lines of age deepened by years of worry, fear, and secrets. Queen Elowen stood nearby, her hands pressed to her chest, eyes wide with concern. "Seraphina, it is not what you think." "It is exactly what I think," Seraphina interrupted. "I am not a child. I am not helpless, and I am not going to be told lies anymore." Alaric's jaw tightened. With a slow, measured step, he gestured for the guards to leave the chamber. The doors closed, sealing them in silence. "You are not cursed," he said finally, his voice heavy, "but the stars marked you at birth." He led her through winding staircases to the highest tower of the palace. Dust motes danced in the air as they entered a chamber few had ever seen. Shelves of ancient tomes and scrolls lined the walls, sealed with iron clasps. The air smelled of aged parchment, faintly sweet with candle wax. From a carved chest, Alaric withdrew a scroll bound in crimson thread. The parchment seemed to hum faintly as he handed it to her. "The night you were born, a comet streaked across the sky," he began. "The royal astrologer predicted a convergence. The crimson star, the veil of thorns, and the scales of Erendor. The child born under these signs would carry the balance of life and death." Seraphina unfolded the scroll, reading the words carefully. "Born beneath the crimson star, the royal child shall wield the scales of life and death. In her 21st year, blood shall drown the kingdom, by her hand or for her sake." Her hands trembled slightly as she rolled it back up. "So all these years, the fear, the rules, the guards, it wasn't to protect me from the world. It was to protect the world from me." Elowen stepped forward, her voice trembling. "No, my darling. No, my daughter. You are our light. You are our child." Seraphina shook her head, her gaze turning to the distant mountains beyond the tower window. Thunder rumbled faintly, and the clouds seemed to press against the palace. "If the prophecy will come true," she said softly, "then I will not wait helplessly. I will master it. I will decide its ending." Her father's shoulders slumped. Some forces should never be touched. Seraphina met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Then they will master me instead." Outside, the wind howled against the tower. Somewhere far beyond Valarith, hidden in shadowed lands, something ancient stirred in answer. The prophecy had been spoken aloud, and fate had begun listening. The sorcerer's offer. He arrived 3 weeks later, unannounced and uninvited, yet his presence commanded the attention of the entire court. Malrek of the Obsidian Vale stepped through the palace gates dressed not as a warrior, but as a scholar. His robes were black as midnight, threaded with silver runes that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. His dark hair fell loosely around sharp, calculating eyes that seemed to pierce through the walls themselves. He carried no sword, no shield, only the weight of knowledge that could rival the kingdom's libraries. King Alaric's hand tightened on the armrest of his throne. "State your purpose, stranger," he demanded. "This is not a place for wanderers or charlatans." Malrek's lips curved into a faint smile. "I come bearing knowledge, your majesty, knowledge of forces that predate kings and prophecies." Seraphina, standing at her father's side, felt a strange pull in the air as his gaze met hers. There was an intensity there, magnetic, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. For the first time, she felt the pulse of the ley lines beneath the palace responding to another. "You presume much by walking into my court uninvited," Alaric said sharply. "I was invited," Malrek replied calmly, his eyes never leaving Seraphina's. "The child born under the Crimson Star seeks understanding. I have come to offer it." Alaric's jaw tightened. "And what would you have her understand?" "That her power is not death itself," Malrek said softly, stepping closer. "It is equilibrium. The forces she wields are drawn from life, yet they are tied to the balance of the world. Every life she saves takes energy from elsewhere. Every death she heals bears a cost." Seraphina's pulse quickened. She had felt it herself in the market that day, the surge of energy, the unintended consequence. "Then I can control it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes," Malrek replied, "but you must learn. Power is not given, it is guided. If left unchecked, it will choose for you. But if trained, it can be your ally rather than your curse." Alaric's face darkened. "And I suppose you offer yourself as her guide?" Malrek inclined his head. "I offer knowledge, but only she can decide how to use it." Against her father's warnings, Seraphina nodded. "Then I will learn. I will understand what I am, and I will master it." That evening, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Malrek began her training. He taught her to sense the invisible threads connecting living beings, the hum beneath the soil, the pulse in the trees, the flow of life through every living thing. The first time she redirected the energy from a withering branch into a wounded bird. The creature flapped its wings and flew. The branch collapsed completely, yet no human was harmed. And somewhere in the shadows, Malrek watched her with an intensity that hinted at secrets even he had not revealed. By the time Seraphina turned 19, the kingdom of Valarith no longer felt like the sanctuary of her childhood. The marble halls and golden towers remained gleaming in the sunlight, yet the air was thick with tension. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors, servants exchanged wary glances, and even the soldiers patrolling the palace seemed on edge. The people spoke of her in hushed tones, their fear entwined with awe. Some called her the Crimson Heir, others, more ominously, the coming storm. A landslide had struck the northern province only days after Seraphina's visit to oversee winter relief. Crops were lost, homes buried, families grieving. Though rain had softened the earth for weeks, the villagers insisted it was the child born of the stars who had called disaster upon them. "The princess walks and the earth trembles," they whispered. King Alaric's response was swift and harsh. Patrols increased, curfews were enforced, and dissidents were arrested for spreading fear. Public speakers warning of the Crimson Curse vanished under cover of night. Where protection had once been offered, control now ruled. Seraphina watched her father grow increasingly tense, his hand tightening over the hilt of his ceremonial sword as if brute strength could contain fate itself. "You are feeding their fear," Seraphina said one evening in the council chamber, her voice trembling with both frustration and sorrow. "I am preserving the kingdom," Alaric replied, voice firm, unyielding. "If I show weakness, all will be lost." "Preserving it through fear is no preservation at all," she countered. Her gaze drifted to the palace windows, beyond which the city below stirred with anxious energy. "You are preparing for a battle that has already begun. Yet you do not see that the enemy is already inside these walls." Her words hung in the air like smoke. Alaric's face hardened, yet beneath his stern expression, Seraphina saw a flicker of doubt, the weight of years spent guarding not only the kingdom but her fragile childhood. Meanwhile, her lessons with Malrek took on a darker tone. He guided her through the invisible currents that ran beneath Valerith, teaching her to sense life itself, the hum in the soil, the heartbeat of the city, the quiet pulse of distant villages. Every life is a thread, he murmured, and they are all connected. If chaos rises, your power will respond. Seraphina felt it now, more acutely than ever. The web of life stretched across the kingdom, and she began to notice a pattern. The rebellions, the accidents, the crops that failed, they were no longer random. Someone was shaping the chaos, pulling at the threads to push the kingdom toward fear, toward destruction. For the first time, she realized that the prophecy was not only a warning, it was a warning someone intended to exploit. The crown, once a symbol of stability, now trembled on her father's head, and beneath the gilded palace walls, the scales of life and death had begun to tip. The truth arrived on the eve of Seraphina's 20th birthday, sharp and unrelenting. She had spent months tracing patterns, rebellions, accidents, landslides, and strange illnesses across the kingdom. Every incident left a faint trace of magic, too subtle for ordinary mages to detect. But not for her. The ley lines hummed beneath her feet, whispering secrets she was only beginning to understand. Late one night, she climbed the spiral stairs to the palace's archive tower. The wind howled against the windows, rattling panes and sending drafts through the stacks of parchment. She laid out a large map on a sturdy oak table, marking every disaster in red ink. As she stepped back, her stomach twisted. The points formed a deliberate spiral, tightening toward the capital, toward her. Footsteps echoed softly behind her. "You learn quickly," Malrek's smooth voice said. Seraphina did not turn immediately. She already knew. "You arranged them," she said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. A pause. Then, without denial, he stepped closer. "I guided certain opportunities, yes? You orchestrated suffering across the kingdom?" Her chest heaved. "You manipulated fear, death, and pain, all to make me stronger?" "I orchestrated awakening," he corrected, his dark eyes gleaming. "Every tragedy sharpened your connection to the ley lines. Every uprising strengthened your influence. I did not create chaos to destroy. You see only its surface. I created it so that you would rise, fully aware of the power you wield." "You played with lives," she spat, taking a step back. "Innocent lives." "Yes," he admitted calmly, his voice devoid of remorse. "Because power requires sacrifice, Seraphina. The prophecy does not dictate fate, it reveals potential, and potential must be awakened." She realized then that the rebellions were not random, the disasters not coincidence. They were carefully orchestrated by the very man who claimed to guide her. Malrek had not been a teacher. He had been a manipulator, shaping her growth like clay on a wheel, pushing her closer to the edge of prophecy. "And the kingdom?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You risked them all?" "Only temporarily," he said, stepping even closer. "In the end, all will bow to the balance, the scales of life and death. You are its anchor, and I merely ensured it would find its weight." Seraphina's mind raced. Rage, fear, and betrayal intertwined into a tight knot of power. This man she had trusted, who had guided her, who had made her feel she could master her gift. He had fed on her growth and manipulated her every step. "You underestimated me," she said finally, her voice low, dangerous. "I am not a pawn. I am the scales themselves." Malrek's lips curved faintly. "Perhaps. But the 21st year approaches, the balance is tipping. You cannot stop what has already begun." Before she could strike, he vanished, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and ash. Seraphina stood alone in the archive, trembling, but resolute. The betrayal cut deeper than prophecy. Not because he had deceived her, but because part of her had wanted to believe him. Now she knew the truth. The blood promised by the stars was not fate. It was a choice forced upon her, and the final year had begun. The eve of Seraphina's 21st birthday arrived beneath a sky unnaturally still. No wind stirred the banners atop the palace towers, no birds traced the horizon, and even the city itself seemed to hold its breath, as if sensing the storm to come. Then the horns sounded, low, long, and impossibly ominous. From the eastern hills, shadows moved like a living tide. Malrek had returned, not as a teacher this time, but as a conqueror. His army stretched across the horizon, an unnatural force of mercenaries clad in black and ash, soldiers bound by dark oaths, and creatures of bone and shadow that slithered and stalked across the land. At their centre rode Malrek, calm and poised as though attending a court rather than orchestrating war. Flames erupted along the outer districts before the royal army could organise. Civilians screamed and fled through narrow streets, seeking sanctuary behind palace walls. The echoes of panic reverberated through the capital, reaching Serafina's ears even atop the highest battlement. Every heartbeat of the people thumped like hammers against her chest. She felt the ley lines beneath the city surge, responding violently to Malrek's presence. Crimson energy flickered along the cobblestones, racing like veins of molten fire through the kingdom itself. Each pulse reverberated in her bones, reminding her that this battle was no ordinary siege. It was personal. End it! Malrek's voice rang like a bell across the battlefield, amplified by magic. Fulfill the prophecy. Let the Crimson Star rise in blood. The temptation struck Serafina like a dagger. If she unleashed all her power now, she could destroy him instantly, annihilate his army in a single blaze of energy, but the cost, thousands of innocent lives, was too high. The prophecy did not dictate what she should do, only what could happen if she failed to choose. Behind her, King Alaric barked orders, trying to marshal the guards and soldiers into formation. Queen Elowen knelt beside the chapel doors, silently praying, her lips moving in urgent, whispered words. The kingdom teetered on the edge of chaos, and the scales were tipping. Serafina closed her eyes and felt the heartbeat of Valarith. The frightened children hiding beneath carts, the wounded soldiers trembling in the streets, the city itself alive with fear. And beneath it all she sensed Malrek, bright, coiled and intertwined with the ley lines. If she struck recklessly, the kingdom itself would unravel. She stepped forward onto the battlement's edge, crimson light shimmering faintly along her fingertips. Every nerve, every sense was alive to the threads of life, stretching outward, connecting her to every living thing in Valarith. For the first time she understood. The prophecy's blood did not demand devastation, it demanded choice. And in that moment, Serafina knew the battle would not be won by force alone, it would be won by her mastery. With a deep breath, she leapt into the fray, a burst of crimson light scattering soldiers and shadow alike. The siege had begun, but the war for the kingdom's fate was only starting. The battlefield was eerily silent in the moments before confrontation. Smoke curled from burning streets, mingling with the scent of ash and blood. Soldiers crouched behind shattered carts, their swords trembling in their hands. Shadow creatures, dark and unnatural, paused as though sensing the culmination of forces far beyond their understanding. And at the centre of it all, Princess Serafina faced Malrek, the man who had betrayed her trust and manipulated the kingdom for his own designs. He stood tall, unshaken, cloaked in the aura of the ley lines he had so carefully bound to himself. Crimson sparks danced along his hands, crackling with unspent energy. His calm demeanour only stoked the fire of rage in Serafina's chest. "You feel it now," he said softly, voice amplified by the pulse of the magic around them. The convergence, the prophecy tightening. She did feel it. The ley lines beneath the kingdom throbbed violently, responding to both of them. Her fingers tingled as threads of life stretched toward her like invisible cords, some quivering with fear, others pulsing with desperation. Malrek had anchored himself to the kingdom's energy. Harming him recklessly would tear Valarith apart. "You tied yourself to the kingdom," she said quietly, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. "If you die, Valarith dies with you." His lips curved into a faint, almost sadistic smile. "At last you understand." Rage, fear, and the memory of betrayal collided inside her. She remembered every tragedy he had orchestrated, the disasters, the rebellions, the manipulated accidents, and every lesson he had disguised as guidance. Every hardship had strengthened her, but at a terrible cost. "You created chaos to force me into power," she said, her voice steady despite trembling hands. "You fed on the lives of my people and called it awakening." "Yes," he admitted without hesitation, "but the prophecy is not a sentence. It is a key, and keys must be turned." Serafina's eyes burned with clarity. The prophecy demanded blood, but it did not dictate whose. She unclasped the dagger at her belt and pressed it to her palm. Crimson welled from the cut, hot and alive. Every heartbeat of the kingdom pulsed in response, and threads of magic stretched toward her like the kingdom itself was holding its breath. "I choose," she whispered. She pressed the bleeding palm against the earth, and the ley lines flared violently, not outward to destroy, but upward toward herself. The energy twisted, coiling around her, absorbing the tension Malrek had built over years. Malrek staggered, his tether to the kingdom unraveling, leaving him exposed. The threads that had bound him snapped, and with a scream that reverberated across the battlefield, he crumpled. Smoke and shadow erupted from his form before dissipating, leaving only silence. Seraphina fell to her knees, panting, her blood mingling with the earth, but the kingdom had survived. The scales had been tipped, and this time she had chosen the balance herself. The battlefield remained still, yet alive. The prophecy had demanded blood. It had been given, but it was her blood, freely offered, not the kingdom's. For 3 days, Seraphina lay unconscious in the royal infirmary. The kingdom had held its breath, praying for her life, while the damage from Malrek's siege was assessed. Fires were extinguished, wounded soldiers and citizens tended, and Malrek's remaining forces, now leaderless and scattered, vanished into the wilderness from which they had emerged. His body had turned to ash at dawn, a final reminder that his hold over the kingdom had been rooted not in might alone, but in the magic he had bound to himself. Queen Elowen refused to leave her daughter's side, brushing damp hair from Seraphina's pale face and murmuring prayers into her ear. King Alaric, usually unflinching, stood at the window for hours on end, eyes scanning the clear morning sky, haunted by the devastation his kingdom had nearly suffered. No comet blazed overhead, no red star marked the heavens. Only sunlight filtered gently through the high-arched windows, illuminating the quiet triumph and the fragile hope that remained. On the third morning, Seraphina inhaled sharply and opened her eyes. They were not glowing red, nor burning with uncontrolled energy, but calm, bright, and steady. Every thread of magic she had absorbed from the ley lines now hummed within her in perfect balance, tethered to her will rather than dictated by prophecy. She was alive. The kingdom was intact. The balance had been maintained. The healers wept openly. Soldiers who had fought at her side bowed their heads in relief. Queen Elowen's tears fell freely, and she pressed her daughter's hand to her lips. "You chose life," she whispered. "No," Seraphina said softly, her voice still weak but resolute. "I chose balance. The prophecy demanded blood, but it did not demand destruction. I gave myself freely to it, and it answered." King Alaric descended from his vigil, kneeling beside her. "I ruled in fear for too long," he confessed. "My measures, my paranoia, they nearly cost us everything. You have done what I could not. You have mastered what was meant to destroy you." The royal court assembled in the palace days later for her coronation. The kingdom had endured scars, yes, burned streets, empty houses, grieving families, but Valarith stood. When the crown was placed upon her head, it was not heavy with dread or doom. It felt light, radiant, a symbol of earned authority rather than fated terror. Seraphina gazed out from the highest battlement, watching her people move through the streets, tending their lives and rebuilding their homes. She felt the heartbeat of Valarith beneath her feet, and the pulse of every living being, perfectly in sync with her own. Prophecies, she realized, were not chains, they were crossroads. They demanded attention, not obedience. The legend of the Crimson Star would be told for generations, not as the tale of a cursed princess born to destroy, but as the story of a queen who faced destiny and chose her own path. She had stared into fate itself, offered her blood freely, and rewritten the outcome. Her story is not about doom. It is about hope. It is about choosing light when the world expects darkness. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. Your time, your support, and your love for these stories truly mean everything. If this story touched you, moved you, or kept you on the edge of your seat, please don't forget to like, share, comment your favourite moment, and subscribe for more epic, emotional stories like this. Tell me, would you have made the same choice Seraphina did? I can't wait to read your thoughts.